WDCN, Nashville.
This week on Sneak Previews, we look at the explosion of new films on a subject once considered dangerous and taboo, and that's love affairs across racial lines. With big movies featuring Kevin Costner and Michelle Pfeiffer and Denzel Washington and Wesley Snipes and Whoopi Goldberg and many other big stars featured in our special show, Interracial Romance.
This problem. I fell in love with your daughter. And as incredible as it may seem, she fell in love with me. And we flew back to San Francisco to see if you or Mrs. Strayton would have any objections if we got married. Joanna told her mother as soon as she walked in, and I had the stupid idea that maybe there was some way to break this gently.
That was Spencer Tracy, of course, who finished his role in this picture just 2 weeks before he died. And in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, he plays a liberal newspaper publisher who's forced to put his ideals to the test when his daughter decides to marry the brilliant, charismatic, and very determined Sidney Poitier. Now, this picture looks highly dated today, but back in 1967, it won 8 Oscar nominations and stirred up quite a bit of controversy as one of those rare films from that era to deal with the subject of this week's show, and that's interracial romance. I'm Michael Medved.
And oh, how times have changed. I'm Jeffrey Lyons, and last year alone, for example, suddenly there were a dozen movies which featured interracial couples. But many still had some of the familiar elements of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Likeable, almost perfect couples whose only problem is the prejudice of the intolerant society around them. In the excellent Mississippi MARSALA, for instance, a new twist was added to the old formula as it depicted the emerging romance between an African-American man, Denzel Washington, and a young Indian woman who'd come to Mississippi with her family and who helps them run a small motel. But her father is dead set against the relationship.
Oh, I'm Demetrius Williams. Glad to make your acquaintance.
I know who you are.
Then you know I'm here to see Mina.
That will not be possible.
All right. All right, well, then I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk with you, son.
I'm sorry, but we have nothing to discuss.
No, I think we do. I believe we do, being that you done about ruined my reputation and my business. I think I'm entitled to an answer, don't you? Oh, I see. I see. So you think I ain't good enough for your daughter, is that it?
No, that's not it. Mina is free to love anyone, to live as she chooses. I respect her freedom. But that does not absolve me of my responsibility as a father.
Well, no disrespect to you, sir, but she's a grown woman and we care for each other very much. Now, I think that's all there is to it.
You know, once I was like both of you. I thought I could change the world, be different. But the world is not so quick to change. Mina is my only child. I don't want her to go through the same struggle as I did.
Struggle? Look, I'm a black man born and raised in Mississippi. Ain't a damn thing you can tell me about struggle.
What do you know about my...
No, I know. I know. I know you and your folks can come down here from God knows where and be about as black as the ace of spades, and as soon as you get here, you start acting white and treating us like we your doormats. I know that you and your daughter ain't but a few shades from this right here. That I know.
Zebrahead played only briefly in theaters, but it's worth seeing on video. It has a Jewish high school kid in Detroit falling for a transfer student from New York.
I never went out with a black girl before.
Do you know what I was gonna ask?
I'm psychic. You ever went out with a white guy before?
In East New York? No.
What does your mother think about this? What does she really think about this?
She's not trying to hear it at all. What does your father think?
My father doesn't care who I date. As long as I date regularly, he don't care.
What do your friends think?
You know, my man D's cool with it, right? And the rest of them I don't care about. I don't care what they think.
But in the school cafeteria, it's pretty clear that her friends have mixed feelings about crossing racial lines when it comes to dating.
Well, he's fine. No, he ain't. Oh, no, white boy. No. Why would you go out with a white boy? I just wouldn't. All right, then. Would you go out with a Dominican? Yeah, the right one. I'm crap. Okay, then, would you go out with a Chinese boy? Yeah. You go out with a Chinese boy before you go out with a white boy? Hell yeah. By yourself. Say he gets angry at you and start cursing you out in that Oriental talk. You're not going to understand a word he's saying. All right, there. Would you kick it with an Italian boy? Why not? Yeah. You kick it with an Italian boy? Yep.
Flirting was set in Australia in 1965 and concerns the budding romance between a shy, brilliant white boy and a student from Uganda at a nearby girls' school. The two are drawn to one another by their rebellious natures, as here, she brings an unconventional approach to a stuffy inter-school debate.
Having listened carefully to the speakers of both sides and wishing to be totally impartial, I fear the position for which my team is arguing is untenable, though not for the tedious reasons given by our opponents, the last speaker excepted. My colleagues have quoted many ancient poets and philosophers to support our case that intellectual pursuits are the highest form of human endeavor. But most contemporary artists seem more interested in bodily functions. For example, I don't want you toast my bread. I don't want you make my bed. I don't want your money too. I just want to make love to you. Tutti frutti, en Rudy. Tutti frutti, en Rudy. Tutti frutti, en Rudy. Oh, what bopalumo, a lot bamboo.
That actress is named Thandie Newton. She was 16 when she shot this picture. She is going to be a major star. One of the reasons I liked Flirting enormously. I mean, I thought this was a brilliant film. It'll be out on video soon and is very much worth seeing. It's one of those movies, however, I think that illustrates one of the aspects of a lot of the films that have been made on this subject, which is that the black character, the African or African-American character, ends up being absolutely perfect and irresistible. I mean, almost without flaws. When you've got Denzel Washington and Sidney Poitier, I mean, the only question is the white family worthy of them?
Right. I watched Guess Who's Coming to Dinner again the other day, and it's not as if she's bringing home Mike Tyson. She's bringing home Sidney Poitier, and they read his resume. I mean, he's the kind of person in this story who would have turned down the Nobel Prize. They really load the issue, but that's the only way, apparently, they could get that story made back then, but it began to get people to think about those things.
And I think one of the important things to remember is at the time Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was made, we had just gotten rid of anti-miscegenation laws in this country. It used to be illegal in many states to have that kind of marriage. It just shows how far we've come.
Just a few years after the Civil Rights Law was passed as well. And also a picture like Mississippi MARSALA found its audience, but I see on video it doesn't lose any of its strength or poignancy at all. The two work very well together, and you want these two people to make it. You know they're in love if only the people around them will leave them alone.
But I think we have to explain that Roshan Seth, who plays her father so very well in the scene we saw there and throughout the movie, one of the reasons he has such a difficult time accepting Denzel Washington is because he's an Indian, but he's not from India. He's from Uganda, and he was expelled by Idi Amin. He famously expelled tens of thousands of Indians who had been living there. So he has this resentment and this hurt that he's carrying toward black people in general.
The first part of that movie is horrifying because it's set in Uganda, and that's why the scene that we showed is one of my favorite from last year, because we know what he went through, because we see that at the beginning of the movie, and Denzel Washington, of course, can't because he was in Mississippi all the time, but we can empathize with his viewpoint as well. They work very well together in that scene.
I must say, as far as Zebrahead's concerned, this is a film, we should say, that is a new director, written and directed by Anthony Drazen, who I think has some talent. It's produced by Oliver Stone. I wanted to like the picture. I just can't share your enthusiasm for it. I mean, I was struck by the fact, I don't think I've ever seen a commercially released film where I've seen the microphone boom in the shot so often.
Well, that's not
horribly amateurish and badly written.
That may have been the print that you saw. It may have been that you saw it, may have seen it on video, but nevertheless, the film's message is important. These are two kids who you're not sure if they're going to make it to the extent that you are in Mississippi MARSALA. But here, again, society gets in the way of them. The two young actors are very good in the roles,
I think the performers, particularly Ann Bush Wright, who plays that young woman there, are better than the material they're given in that picture. But it certainly is an interesting film, challenging and worth seeing. Okay. Well, next up, we're talking about a new trend that's developed in this presentation of this subject. And of all the recent movies that show interracial couples, surely the one that drew the most publicity and that most obviously marked a breakthrough concerning the subject matter was Jungle Fever, of course directed by Spike Lee. Now, artistically, this picture certainly wasn't Spike Lee's best, but it is full of challenging ideas, and it showed romance across racial lines in a very different way than it had ever been shown before. Here, in Jungle Fever, the key problem isn't prejudice of outsiders, it's the guilt and the stereotypes in the lovers' own heads.
You know, Angie, I've never cheated on my wife before. I mean, I'm married. Happily married.
I know. I kind of figured that.
Wesley Snipes plays a married architect who gets involved with Annabella Sciorra, a temp who's assigned to his office and is willing to work after hours.
We out here tonight.
Later, Snipes confides in his best friend, played by Spike Lee, but asks him to be sure to keep a secret.
My lips are sealed. Come on, what happened?
I cheated on Drew for the first time.
You did that? When did this happen?
The other day.
Yeah? I thought you were gonna drop a bomb.
Well, she's white.
White? Man, you're crazy.
She's Italian.
H-bomb.
From Bensonhurst.
Nuclear megaton bomb.
Hey, man, it just happened. I mean, it just...
Got a bad feeling about this one.
What's going on, Angie?
Sciorra's friends are also eager to hear about her new romance.
I don't know.
Yeah, but you're wearing that ring. I mean, come on. Yeah, why do you look so happy?
This isn't about
Just get the glow on the face. I know.
I'm not glowing.
Well, all right, so what is it? What's going on?
All right. But you gotta swear. I mean, this is like swearing on a stack of Bibles, swearing on like a zillion rosary beads.
I swear on my great-grandmother, okay?
We swear what?
I'm seeing somebody.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You two timer?
Who are you seeing?
Oh.
Somebody from work.
And what is he, like blonde, blue-eyed surfer type?
Hey, dude.
Right? What is that?
He's black.
If your father ever found out, I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's not gonna.
No, of course not. Hey, look, this is the 90s. There's nothing wrong with it, you know? You having a good time?
As with Jungle Fever, director Jean-Jacques Hano's The Lovers shows that the two main characters can never fully get past the racial barriers in their own minds. Now, it's set in colonial Vietnam in 1929 and based on a famous autobiographical novel. The story focuses on the steamy affair between an impoverished but proud French teenager and an older Chinese aristocrat. Now, after they've made love for the first time, they assure each other that their relationship can't possibly be serious.
My mother, she'll kill me if she finds out the truth. My brother, he'd kill you. Imagine, with a Chinaman. Since I've been little, she tells me that here in the colonies, a girl that isn't a virgin anymore can no longer find a husband. Do you think that's true?
Yes, your mother's right. It's no longer possible after that. That dishonor. For instance, if I wanted to marry you, well, you would not be allowed. We can't tolerate the idea of that. I'm Chinese. I'm sorry. Now that you've done that with me, marriage between us would be impossible.
Well, all is for the best then. Chinese? I don't like the Chinese very much.
Most recently, Love Field explored the nearly insurmountable emotional obstacles keeping an interracial couple apart. Michelle Pfeiffer plays a ditzy Dallas hairdresser running away from her husband and traveling across country to attend the funeral of President Kennedy in 1963. On the way, she's thrown together with Dennis Haysbert, a widower father who's determined to rescue his little girl from an abusive foster home. Now, Pfeiffer thinks he's rejecting her just because she used a racial slur.
It's because I called you, isn't it? I only did that to throw him off the track. I didn't mean it.
That's a load off my mind. Thank you for not meaning, and thank you for not really meaning to put the FBI on my, and for sticking out your thumb and bringing those crackers down on me. Hey, baby, thanks for that, too. But you'll excuse me if I don't feel like hanging around for the next thing you'll be telling me you're sorry for.
And what about Jonelle? You ought to stay for her sake. Think of what's best for her.
What's best for her is none of your damn business.
It wasn't yours either till a week ago.
Look, when you have a child of your own, lady, you can judge me all you want. Till then, you just sit tight in your little dream world where the First Lady gives a about you.
Go to hell! I thought we understood each other. Well, we're both running, aren't we? We're both wanting something more.
Don't you dare think that we're the same. Being bored and being black are different. Do you hear that? Your life in Dallas, hell. That's open air my child may never breathe. Free to live where she wants. To drive up north without hiding behind somebody else's skirt. Even free to grow up as bored or stupid or as useless as any white woman. We are not the same.
You know, this is the scene where they deal with this potential problem head-on more than any other in the movie. And I think that's part of the problem I have with the film. It couldn't make up its reason for being there. Is this a movie about an interracial romance, primarily? Or about a woman fleeing an abusive husband, or a tiresome marriage, or the weekend that President Kennedy was assassinated? The film
and
never
she's so
quite...
obsessed with Jackie Kennedy.
But Haysbert is wonderful.
Isn't he
He's
good?
an actor whose work is not familiar to most people, and he's fine in the part.
You know what? I think he blows her off the screen, frankly. I mean, I know her performance has gotten a lot of praise, a lot of Oscar talk behind it, but basically she's getting a lot of credit for doing a pretty good Texas accent and putting on a very unattractive blonde wig. That's not the same as a great performance. It's an interesting film, directed by Jonathan Kaplan, but it really fudges the issue of just how romantically involved they are.
That's where I thought it
sort of
copped
cuts
out.
away. I mean, I'm all for discretion in movies, but you know, you've got to know just how involved are these people, and it dodges that issue throughout.
You loved The Lover. It's rare that I see you go overboard for a picture, at least from my perspective. The film disturbed me, maybe because the romance between a guy in his mid-30s and a 14 or 15-year-old. Well, she looked a lot younger, and to me, she wasn't that delightful a character, wasn't that endearing a character, pretty obnoxious at points in the movie, and there was a whole subplot I could have done with that. I think the film is beautiful to look at, but beyond
of course,
that,
it's based on a novel by Marguerite Duras. It's based on her own recollections, and it does have very disturbing elements, and it has a lot of very graphic scenes, but I really thought they were never pornographic. I mean, it's about tenderness, and part of what is there, and you pointed out rightly, is the big problem these people face is not just the racial differences. The big problem is the fact that she's a teenager, and she's running away, hiding from school to go to these rendezvous and these trysts, but it really does have, for me, that quality of memory. You can imagine somebody as an older lady, much older lady in her 70s, looking back and recalling these almost sensual memories of the smell, the sights, the sounds, of the touches. You know, I think, though, The Lover shows something that all three of these films have in common very directly, and Jungle Fever, too, which is that in these films, the white characters, the Caucasian characters, are less educated, less well-to-do than the black, or in the case of The Lover, the Chinese character. They're the real aristocrats, and it's almost slumming for the black characters, as in Jungle Fever, or for the Chinese character in The Lover, to be involved with these people.
But it's interesting to look back at Jungle Fever now that Spike Lee has made Malcolm X, a film which became a cause celeb and is a much more important film.
Which also has interracial romance in Malcolm's early years.
That's right. But they're kind of on the same level of education.
Yeah.
It almost makes Jungle Fever seem almost trivial. Why was he bothering with something like this when he has these great films to make? But Jungle Fever has its moments, and it deals with the problem in a very profound way.
It really does, and Snipes is very good. One of the things about Jungle Fever is I think all of the things that Spike Lee said about the film in interviews were much more interesting than the film itself and very challenging. Well, when it comes to showing interracial love affairs, the most amazing new trend has been the upsurge of recent movies, some of them enormous box office hits, that showed mixed couples but never even mentioned racial issues. They just accepted the attraction between these characters as a normal fact of life. The Bodyguard, for instance, was originally written with Barbra Streisand in mind, but when Whitney Houston got the part, the filmmakers chose not to inject racial elements at all, as they focused on a threatened pop star's growing attraction for her strictly business security expert, Kevin Costner.
I can't go out on a date because you have to be with me every minute. I mean, what if he wants to invite me up to his place afterwards? Are you going to come too? So, the only thing I can figure is for you to take me out. That's what I was wondering. You know? I mean, what do you think? Only if you want to. Only if you want to.
Rachel!
God, this is so embarrassing. You decide, okay?
Yeah. Sandy Harris is on the phone.
Tell her I'll call her back, sweetheart. I'm getting fixed up here. So who's this guy?
In Wayne's world, Wayne and Garth may be white, but they seem to comprise a minority group, or at least a language group, all their own. Wayne never thinks twice about his cultural differences with aspiring Chinese-American rock star Tia Carrere.
I love your band. You guys wail.
Thanks.
You guys kick. You're double live Gonzo, Intensity in 10 cities, live at Budokan. You know, if you guys got a break, you could really make it.
Yeah, and if a frog had wings, they wouldn't bump his when he hopped.
Interesting. Where did you learn English?
College. And the Police Academy movies.
Ah. Cassandra, I've got something I want to say to you.
Campbell, that's amazing. You learned how to say I look pretty in Cantonese.
In Sister Act, the love affair between mafia honcho Harvey Keitel and lounge singer Whoopi Goldberg is always something less than ideal. And after she witnesses a murder, then hides out in a convent, their reunion definitely isn't a moment for hearts and flowers.
I loved you, Dolores. I gave you everything. My affection, my time, a big-time career. How do you repay me? What's the thanks I get? Where's the loyalty? You shouldn't have done that to me, babe.
You'll be judged. We all will.
I don't get judged.
Vince, she's been acting weird since we picked her up.
It's like she's scared of nothing.
She's scared. Tell the boys how scared you are.
I forgive you, Vince.
Waster.
All right. And also, in the critics' favorite, The Crying Game, the racial difference between the characters is never really an issue in the movie. They've got much bigger problems. He's an IRA terrorist, she's a London hairdresser, and we only learn about the biggest obstacle to their relationship much later in the movie.
See that, Carl?
See what, Bill?
He gave me a look.
Did he?
Just cut his hair, you know.
Yeah?
So what do you think?
Nice.
Did it again.
I saw that one.
And what would you call that?
That was a look.
What do you think his name might be?
I have no thoughts on the subject. Jimmy.
Jimmy?
Jimmy, that's what he said.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, Del.
All these four movies have become, in the last part of the show, become big box office hits. And The Crying Game found its audience gradually. And it's a gimmick movie, but there's so much else going on here. The IRA and the terrorism and the guy trying to lead the IRA, that the film would have been good no matter what.
And the one thing you can't talk about, which is the gimmick, as you put it, the one thing that is a very big surprise in the movie. I mean, I think the fact is that the success of all four of these films shows what the American people are looking for in the portrayal of interracial romance. The fact that here the attitude is, what's the big deal? Other films, like Jungle Jungle Fever, Zebrahead, where it really is focused on the tension and the harshness of these kind of relationships. Those films have been basically rejected, have not done very well, but these are some of the biggest hits of recent years, treating the fact that people from different races come together in romantic relationships just as a fact of life. It's something that happens, and let's go on.
On the other hand, Bodyguard, if you had not put Whitney Houston there, if you had put a lesser-known singer,
What do you mean, if you had not put Kevin Costner there?
That's right. Would they have been able to do the movie and find their audience without referring to a racial difference here or not? I'm not so sure. The fact is, it is what it is. It was cast as it did and found a huge audience.
Well, because these two people are both such wholesome crossover stars, people who everybody loves. And Wayne's World, again, the attitude is, what's the big deal? Sometimes when you mention to people, oh, we're doing a show on interracial romance, and Wayne's World is, what, interracial? Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Because it's just, I mean, the fact is, Wayne and Garth are their own group entirely. I mean, I think they ought to nominate this film for Best Foreign Language Picture. I like the film a lot.
It happened to me also when we were thinking about films that we didn't have time to include in the show per se, but should be mentioned. For instance, Mr. Baseball has Tom Selleck falling in love with a Japanese woman, and not until we thought about it for this show did we say, oh yes, there's that element in that, and there are several other films like that too.
And you talk about Sister Act, Whoopi Goldberg has another film coming out with Ted Danson called Made in America that has the same theme of an interracial romance that is simply part of the story. But yeah, I think the question here is, why is this happening all of a sudden? Why in 1991 and 92 do you have this real explosion of movies on this subject matter? And I think to some extent it reflects what's going on in society. Right. The fact is that the rate of interracial marriage has tripled since 1970. Now in this country at large, 2% of all married households are headed by interracial couples. So naturally you're going to see more of that on screen.
Even a picture like Malcolm X, which was from Spike Lee, much more important, I think, than Jungle Fever, has an interracial romance to it too. So the element of the interracial romance is there, but it should no longer be the focal point of the movie.
The fact is, whenever you show romantic movies, you have to set up barriers, conflicts that people can overcome. This is one of the last barriers that's left, and it's also very dramatic right now with our focus on the racial problems in this country. So I think we're going to be seeing more of this in the years ahead.
Join us again next week, will you? And we'll review all the new movies in town. I'm Jeffrey Lyons.
And I'm Michael Medved. And until next time on Sneak Previews, don't forget to save us those aisle seats.